and welcome to another edition of Quoth the Raven, Lewis Bright Raven. I am your host, Lewis Bright Raven, 28-year veteran of comics, science fiction, fantasy, horror, and role-playing games as a writer, illustrator, and editor. Tonight's topic is basically going back to the seasons of our youth. You see this text on the opening thing, our opening graphic image. If you can tell me what song I am parodying by emailing me at the address on the bottom of the screen, quote the Raven, lbr72@gmail.com, the first person who gets it right will win a prize. I'll let the winner know, and you can give me your contact information at that time. Remember, name of the song and the artist of what this text is parodying. I'm not going to give any hints. You can take your guess, email me at the address at the bottom of the screen, quote the Raven, lbr72@gmail.com. As always, we give our notice in accordance with the new COPPA regulations. This episode of Quoth the Raven is intended for ages 16 and up. While some of the content we will feature is kid-friendly, the context of the episode is to address and educate older teens and adults, inform them of said content, to research as consumers in service of their youth, in other words, grandparents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, teachers, librarians, etc. There's always the possibility of adult language present on the episode as well, rated TV 16 and up. Okay. Let's go ahead and go into our questions this week. Mark from Michigan asks, do you think that you would have remained interested in comics if you had not met the one kid on the bus that you talked about in the Ted Davies interview? That kid's name was Brian Roseboom. Back in 85, he was playing out scenes from X-Men comics on the bus on the way home. And I got off the bus with him and went to his house and saw my first X-Men issue. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later in the show. Honestly, I don't think I would have been a comics fan if not for that. As far as, making it a career or getting into that scene as much. I had already gravitated away from comics for about 2 or 3 years at that point. And felt like I'd outgrown it. So, in a lot of ways, not just comics, but probably role-playing games as well, I probably wouldn't have gotten into without Brian. So, for better or for worse, he's to blame. Next question. Mike V in Michigan asks, do you think you would have gone over to game writing, module writing, or the likes, or the like more for gaming companies like TSR, Steve Jackson, if comics hadn't captured a fair amount of your focus? In other words, what he's asking me is, would I have done more role-playing games instead of comics if I wasn't a comics fan? I don't know. I don't think so. It's hard to say. When I got out of college in 94, the role-playing game industry was making a drastic turn towards the collectible card games like Magic the Gathering and Rage and Pokemon and stuff like that. And that was so not what I was interested in. And when I relocated from Michigan out west, it was virtually impossible to find anybody who played tabletop role-playing games. So, I don't know. It might have just been the area I was in at the time, or it could have. I don't know. If I had lived in a different area, maybe if I had the right people around me to play role playing games, I think that's something that has to do with role playing in general. If you don't have the right um, community to play with, um, it's not much fun. So, and today, things are totally different because now everything's massive role players online, as opposed to tabletop. Although there is still tabletop games and there's card games and everything as well. Um, it's interesting because where I live now in South Carolina, there's actual stores that are basically gaming rooms where you can go game, and yet at the same time, I've gone visited those establishments, and they don't they're not friendly to me. I don't. I mean, not the environment itself, but the people just don't seem to be as engaging as what they were back in the day. And it's hard to really blame anybody in that respect because society has changed a lot since the 80s and early 90s. We've gone through a lot of societal issues, whether it's you know external terrorism, whether it's racism issues, all the different cultural issues we've been facing that has torn this country apart for the last 25, 30 years. Um, it's not something that's recent. It's not something that happened, under Trump land. It's been there right along, festering underneath the surface in this country. So, and I've watched that gradually change how people behave, and so I don't know. That's something that I probably still would have written for TSR and Steve Jackson, but a lot of what I did for them was more research and historical archive writing and articles about different creators and stuff like that, as well as the gaming writing. But it was more of that side of it. So I'm not sure. A lot of news writing, as what was going on in the industry at the time as well. But who's to say? Next question. Anonymous asks, "What's the published work you are most proud of?" Well, everything you publish is like a child. You aren't going to be prouder of one child over another. You love your children equally. Um, if I had to say the one that's probably most successful, it probably would have been Adventures of Space the Alien that ran 80 issues in the 90s for over a span of about 6 years. But you know, yeah, as far as factual, success, that's probably the one. I don't know if that makes me proud of it. Yeah, pride's not. I just don't think of pride so much on that anymore. Maybe when I was younger, I probably would have, but yeah, I don't know. Um, but yeah, I guess that would probably be it. Next question. Eric from South Carolina asks, "What video gaming systems did you own as a kid, and what games did you play?" Oh, well, I wasn't much of a gamer in terms of video games. Um, in the 80s, I had an Atari 2600. Um, had plenty of games. I mean, I had over probably close to 800 games, which now that I just said I'm not a gamer. How did I have so many games if I wasn't a gamer? A lot of the fact is, my parents bought a lot of the games when the video game bust happened for the Ataris, and they were like a quarter a game, 50 cents a game for a cartridge. So that's how I got that many games. It wasn't that I was that, um, you know, enamored with video games per se. It was just, hey, it's a new game, it's a quarter, what the heck. So there's that. Also in the 80s, stupidly, I owned a Commodore VIC-20 instead of a Commodore 64 because I did not like the color of brown for the Commodore 64. That grayish brown just was putrid color. I hated it, and I want the white computer. And I wasn't savvy enough, smart enough to understand that the 64 had more memory and more, um, newer model, so to speak, basically. And so I did have a VIC-20, and I had a few video games on there that I played. And I played on my friends' Commodore 64s because everybody else had a 64, of course. And we played Bard's Tale, Ultima, Archon Chess, Ghostbusters, a few other games on that. Um, but by the time Nintendo and Sega 64 and all that stuff was coming out in the late 80s, early 90s, I was completely out of video games. Very rarely ever played any of that stuff. If I was at a friend's house or a friend's dorm room or something, you might see me play Tecmo Bowl or something, but I just really wasn't into the gaming, not video games. Anonymous asks, are you going to talk about some of your other influences as a writer tonight? I mean, writers outside of comics. Yes, I will. That is part of what we'll be discussing this evening. The theme is tonight will be what basically makes me tick. We'll go back to my beginning of my childhood and up through about high school and the different things that influenced me, different authors, different comics, etc. So if you have a question, you can email them to quotheravenlbr72@gmail.com. Subject QTR questions. Please indicate whether or not you want your name and locale read on air. Okay. As people might be knowing, I've been doing the Booktober event this month, where I'm doing my reviews daily. Instead of usually I was going to try and not do reviews of comics here on the regular podcast for that reason, since I'm doing so many on a daily basis. However, there are some books that unfortunately I just can't do on Facebook. They're too mature readers. There's too much mature themes, too much nudity and sex content in it. That would be a problem for Facebook and their monkey monitors, as it were. And even if I say TV-16 at the beginning of the episodes on Facebook, they're snotty. So rather than getting banned for a period of time and having everything screwed up, I just took the one book that was really kind of questionable. I'm going to review that in a few moments, but people ask me why I don't do more Facebook. That's why. Because anybody can do a public thing, especially if they don't like what they see, they report it, and next thing you know, you're banned and your whole platform screwed up. So anyway, let's go ahead and do our one review, and that is for Lonely Receiver issues 1 and 2. Issue 1 was $4.99 and issue 2 was $3.99. The first issue had a cardstock cover, and the second issue had a regular glossy cover. Publisher is Aftershock. The writer is Zach Thompson. The artist is Jen Hickman. The genre is science fiction horror, and it was released over the last 2 months, September and this past yesterday, actually. Number 2 came out. And what it's about is Katrina Vand has a bad breakup with her ex and buys a new technology that allows her to build a new partner. But she's so needy that she effectively pushes this partner away as well. However, when she made this being, She put a part of herself, her essence, her her very her being, her soul, whatever, into this new entity. And now this entity is roaming around free with her identity inside it, while Katrin herself is falling apart, um, both psychologically and physically. The neediness of the lead character, how it's clear that she keeps making the same mistakes and repeating the same mistakes that doomed her original relationship, and may in fact be dooming herself to an even worse fate with this new relationship, is so over the top in one sense, that it's hard to relate to it. But then again, I've seen it happen in real life, and I've even kind of experienced it. Not nearly as bad as um, this character, but I've had some bad relationships where I had a hard time getting over it myself in the past. So what's going on in the book does ring eerily truthful. It's definitely a mature reader's book. There's lots of nudity and sex involved in it. Um, it's also got some semi deep philosophical themes that run pretty heavily throughout the series so far. I recommend it for ages 16 and up. I think a 16-year-old can handle it. Um, but, you know, depending on how parents are, if you're one of those really highfalutin Christians, wait until you're 18, I guess. I don't know. Get out of the house first before you read it. But anyway, I give it a 4 out of 5 stars. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the art. This is the beginning of the story where her ex has left her. Um, different things have gone on, and you know, next thing is she's on her own and she doesn't like being alone, so she goes to this place called Philo, which is like buying this special phone that taps into your genetic structure and into your mind, and it asks you certain questions, you give it answers, and it will then start building and constructing your ideal mate in front of you. It's weird. It's very weird. You can, I don't know if you guys can see this, but the lungs are right there. The one leg is starting to form there. It's kind of weird. There we go. A little bit more. You can see it that the person is forming, and of course, it's a woman on woman thing. So, for those of you who are, homophobic or don't like that, hey, this book isn't for you. Move on. Um, but this is kind of a creepy looking thing as it just forms, and yeah, kind of weird. But anyway, um, at first everything is fine. Basically, the new entity is revolves around her, and she can go do her job and then come back, and it's like, someone waiting home for me, taking care of me, yay. But as things change and evolve, well, this other entity is actually a person of their own. You don't own them, no matter how you bound through this other Philo device thing. And it turns out that she goes and gets a job of her own and isn't always there for our lead anymore because she's busy at her job, or she's met other people, and now she's got, like, at one point there's a mention that she's got 378 other people that she loves too, and I'm like, huh? What now? I don't know what kind of expressionism that is. I don't know if that's like online relationships that she's messing around or what's going on, but it's a weird thing. um and of course, eventually the other one, the new being, leaves her, and she goes to Philo to get her whole life back, because basically what has happened is, with the new entity leaving her, it's actually made her physically lose her identity somehow. I don't exactly understand all that, but that she's gone back to um, the people identification thing with her Philo. Everything's offline, so I'm basically dead. Nobody registers my existence in society. Uh, so she's given her birth certificate, and they're going through all the different new identification, and then they go and try and fix her device, and it turns out that there's nothing wrong with the device. The device is working fine. Um, it's just that the person that she created with the device left her because, well, she was a needy little possessive little bitch. John Norris is in the room. Hello, John. Nice to see you again. And so they're asking her questions about the relationship. And after they go through the questionnaire, they basically say, well, you're not entitled to a refund. Basically just dropped her. She gets home, and there's this entity that's, I don't know if it's like a dark, I'm trying to think of the word, um, hallucination, or a remnant of the person that left or whatever, but it convinces her to go out and try and find this other entity again, this other person. And she does go out, and at the end of the second issue, she may have found the person. It looks like her, but is it really that person, or is there something else going on? They're not really clear yet. It's a really weird book. Like I said, there's a lot of nudity. I took a lot of the didn't show a lot of the nudity in the book. I tried not to, but there is a. I mean, if I were to say go ahead and put this on the Facebook, it would just be not good. It's definitely a mature reader's book. So, again, if you're uh, homophobic or anti-gay or whatever, not your book. Don't try it. If you're, you know, objecting to a lot of sex or nudity in your comics, not your book. Don't bother with it. Otherwise, ages 16 and up. Okay. That is our review for tonight. Tomorrow we'll do more reviews. I don't know exactly what time I'll have tomorrow's show for the reviews for Booktober. Uh, it won't be in the afternoon, it'll be in the evening sometime, but I don't know exactly when. So let's go ahead and move on to our actual theme for tonight. And a lot of people have asked me, over the years, and when Ted Davies wanted to interview me, I thought he was going to do this. So I built this whole platform to use on his interview. And instead, he kind of nixed that and said, no, I want to talk about this over here, and you do that for your show. I'm like, okay. So here we are. I'm a military brat, and at the time I started really reading comics, I was living in Alaska. My father was stationed in Fairbanks. So this is one of the first books I got to, that I can remember reading. Was Aquaman in Adventure Comics number 433. It came out in February 1976, and I got it for my 4th birthday in March of 76. Why this book? Well, I was 3, turning 4 years old. Super Friends had only just relaunched on television. For those of you who don't know, Super Friends originally aired on ABC in 73 and 74, got canceled, and then was brought back in February of 76 to re-air the original 16 episodes. Now, I could get plenty of Batman, Superman from the Adam West and George Reeves shows in syndication, and Filmation was also running the 1968 animated Batman in syndication, which CBS would repackage as The New Adventures of Batman the following year in 77. So I had plenty of those too. I wanted more stories about the rest of the characters that were friends, and here was one. The cover kind of caught my eye. The idea of a fisherman wrapping the fishing line around a person tightly rather frightened me as a child. I think because I probably cut my finger on a fishing line, I remembered how painful that was, and my young mind was trying to equate that. Ted Davies, speaking of the devil, has arrived. Says, "Good evening, everyone." Good evening to you, Ted. So, to my soon-to-be 4-year-old mind, this dorky criminal, the fisherman, was really a dangerous, evil person who was potentially going to slice Aquaman in half with his fishing line. I wanted to see how he was going to get out of it. Unfortunately, I don't own this issue anymore. But another early books in Alaska that I was into, like I said, I was into Batman. I got Batman Family #1 in a store living in Alaska. I think, given the locale, that the store owner cared about returning unsold books because it was just so difficult being that out in the middle of nowhere. Because I got it in July of 76 when we were leaving for Georgia on our next base assignment. And I seem to recall a lot of comics at a trading post kind of store. And I got this in the Spider-Man comics, which I'm going to show you in a moment. I also got number 13, which is, a lot later, almost 2 years later, I think. Over 2 years later. I don't know, not quite 2 years. When we're living in Savannah, Georgia, and my mother was working as a manager and lead buyer representative for Toy City, which was a chain of 27 stores in the Southeast. I got it probably because I didn't put too much of a fuss over getting new school clothes. I was not a person who liked to go shopping as a kid. I didn't like. Clothes was not something else. I was not a clothes horse. Some kids love to have clothes. Some kids, as long as the clothes aren't like falling apart and something, they're clean, I don't care. Was kind of my attitude then. So that, as long as it fit me and everything. So I wasn't much of a person to care. But I can remember my mother the end of summer, right before school, she'd drag me all over town getting me clothes. So if I put up with it enough, I got something for it, I guess. I think I still have a copy of 13. I do not have a copy of #1, unfortunately. The Amazing Spider-Man book I got at the same time as Batman Family #1 at that trading post store in Alaska before moving to Georgia was $149. And I had no idea what was going on with the story. All I knew is that there was 2 Spider-Man and they were going to fight one another. And that's brain melting to a 4-year-old kid whose experience with Spidey was the hiccuping word balloon version on the Electric Company and the 1967 to 70 Bashki cartoon that was running in syndication. That's the one with the theme song. I'm not going to sing it. I think you all know what I mean. If you don't, then look up Spider-Man theme song and you'll probably find it somewhere online. Truth be told, I didn't know who Gwen Stacy or Mary Jane even were, didn't care, didn't understand the context of the story or the significance and the history of the character, but this is a very significant issue. This is the Spider Clone, one of the character that eventually becomes Ben Reilly, and so it's a very interesting thing to get into when you're 4 years old and you come in on the tail end of that story, and you're wondering what's going on, and then go, oh, the clone died. Well, of course, he didn't. We found out much later, but it was kind of interesting. Our next book, or actually books. Um, I was a huge Batman fan, and as I mentioned, my mother was working in as a manager and lead representative buyer for Toy City. So from 79 to 82, ages 7 to 10, she used to get me lots of issues of different things. And these are the ones I can remember getting from 79 to 82. I got 311 through like 321 and a Detective 502. Some of these are, I've replaced a lot of these over the years, because I didn't get to keep them as a kid. Unfortunately, couldn't keep them in good shape that much because I was always moving around. But and I didn't think about bags and boards and that stuff. It didn't even occur to me at that time. Um, I just read these things until they fell apart, basically. um, I can even remember answering on the Batman Detective Comics. It says, "Why is Batman abandoning two of his closest friends to die?" If you don't know who that is, that's Lucius Fox and Alfred Pennyworth uh, at gunpoint there with against the um, outside the barn there. They're in France, and he's going to find out who killed whatever they're being accused of killing the person for. But and I wrote that on the on the cover. I don't know why I did, but I did. And there's some more of the Batmans I got. One of the last storylines I got at that time was this Bloodsport Nightmare and Crimson and What Stalks the Gotham Knight. Robin gets caught by a female vampire while he's off at college and comes home and transforms Batman into an actual vampire. That was an interesting um, trilogy of storyline there. So that kind of stuff is what was appealing to me at that time. I also read a little bit of Superman. I had more than these, but these are the ones that I could remember off the top of my head from covers. And you know, Superman was not really my favorite character. I don't know why. Um, I think perhaps because the George Reeves character seemed um, a little fuddy duddy, a little bit too. Um, I don't know, too goody two shoes, I guess. Too Boy Scout. um, Maybe that's what it was, or maybe I just didn't care for Noelle Neal as Lois Lane as the character. The actress is fine. I just felt Lois was a very dumb character, and from the television series, like how could you not know he's Superman, but type thing. But um, so I think that was part of why I wasn't a big Superman fan at the time. That changed a little bit later when Christopher Reeve's movie came out. Um, but that wasn't for another. That was around that time, but um, by then I was kind of like starting to phase out of comics. So I enjoyed the movie, but I wasn't still was starting to fade out of comic books at that time. Now, one thing I was into heavily was Star Wars. My mom working the toy store, I used to get all the action figures and all the toys, the spaceships and the Death Star play sets and all the play sets that Kenner made at the time. She also got me the Star Wars comics starting with issue 7, and really just every month I got Star Wars, and a lot of this stuff was Carmine Infantino with Terry Austin inks, and I loved it to death. Just Austin really um, carried the book a lot as the inker. Number 13 happened to be the first John Byrne cover. I didn't know John Byrne by name at that time, but apparently that was the first time I saw a Byrne image. That's why I've marked it that way. And I stayed pretty much solid through 78 to 83 reading Star Wars. Like I said, I went from number 7 to like number 40 or 50, around that range, getting every month. They had some interesting characters. One of my favorite issues was number 28. Um, they do a version of Jabba the Hutt that is not the space slug version, because at the time they didn't know what Jabba actually looked like because they hadn't used him in the movies yet. He had been off the camera character. He's a funny looking critter in that issue. And one thing I really like about that story is they're inside a cavern with these mites that can eat through just about anything, including the Millennium Falcon's hull, and they're trying to escape the cavern before their ship gets routed through. And then there was a Dark Encounter, which is 29. That's Darth Vader versus, Vanth, I think is his name. A bounty hunter that's trying to, wants to kill Luke Skywalker because of his friendship with the droids more than anything else, because he's a cyborg and he hates himself for being a cyborg, basically. So he likes to destroy droids since he can't kill himself. So Vader and him are fighting over getting to Luke in that issue. Like I said, around that, what was that? Around 34. So about 34, 35, I stopped. I got number 47 because it just caught my eye with the cover. And then I got the 61, 62 because it was Walt Simonson. And there was some really cool covers. And then my last issue was number 73 in July of 83. And that's about the time I really stopped reading comics for a while, was around that time. And there's some other stuff I read in that era. I read some Avengers that were almost always Perez. There were a few Burns as well, but mostly Perez. Captain America with the Hulk there. It is a Ron Wilson with Bob Layton inks. For some reason, I probably mistook it for a Byrne cover. I did not read a whole lot of Fantastic Four, but this particular issue caught my eye for some reason, and I got that. That was one of my last comics before I took a break. These 2 issues of Cap I got because they were Byrne covers. These 3 Hulks were a set that my mom got me from the store, basically, the toy store. I don't really remember the stories of them. I know I didn't like they. I remember that. But that's about it. I remember the cover for the Layton cover here on 238 more than anything else. Again, kind of reminds me of Byrne, because Layton was doing kind of a Byrne riff of sorts, which of course both of them were riffing Neil Adams. Parents got me Dynamite and Battlestar Galactica as well. These were shows I watched on television, so it's just a kind of a connection there more than anything else. I remember the Battlestar Galactica is mostly because of the Walt Simonson art. Don't really remember the Dynamites story-wise. I just remember having them. The Man from Atlantis is another one that I got because of the TV show. And I got the first 3 issues of Star Trek and like issue number 9 of Star Trek, based off the motion picture. And, a lot of times, I complain about TV and movie licensed comics of today. And I guess I really shouldn't do that, seeing as I bought so many as a kid myself in the 1970s. It just didn't seem like it back then, did it? But I actually did buy quite a bit. I really did like The Man from Atlantis. stuff. I'm trying to remember the artist on that. Frank Robbins was the artist, and I liked a lot of his stuff. A lot of these covers were Ernie Chua, Ernie Chan as well. But the interiors were by Frank Robbins, who you might remember from the Invaders run in the 70s as well. And Battle of the Planets was another TV related comic I got. This was published by Whitman at the time. I never got 5 or 8 as far as the issues, but and I can nothing really good about this comic. I just got it because it was, the planets, and I was kind of the mark for that at the time. Um, it was like I said, I was just into the cartoon, so I got it. But I can't really remember if any of the stories were any good or anything like that. Now, comics were one thing, and that was a big part of what I was doing as a kid back then. But my parents were very much into other means of media entertainment at the time as well. Power Records was a very popular subset where they made audio dramas on vinyl, sometimes with the comic books included. My parents never would get the ones with the books included because the price of the albums with 4 to 6 stories was the same price as a single story with a comic book. So they got me the full albums. Unfortunately, I don't own any of these anymore. John Norris's Power Records, yes. I thought I did. I went through my record collection. I couldn't find any. I thought I still owned the Star Trek one, but I didn't. That's kind of heartbreaking because these things are expensive to get nowadays. Um, a lot of this stuff is the $6 Million Man covers, the Batman art, the Star Trek art. That's all out of Continuity Studios. It's all Neil Adams and Michael Netzer artwork. So that was kind of cool. The Spider-Man friends were pretty cool. Um, John does still have a couple of his Power Records, and I'm jealous. I'm not going to lie about that. I am jealous. He's gonna have to show those one of these days so he can make fun of me uh, when he's a guest host again down the road. In fact, maybe we even didn't. Did you show them the last time you were on, John? I don't remember. I think you did, but I could be wrong. Um, um, had the Superman here. Um, I had this was a 45, the Flash and Aquaman when it wasn't a full album. Um, Gemini Man was pretty cool. That was a different type of character. I also had an Incredible Hulk, which I think is one of the ones that John has. I could be wrong. And another one which was Space 1999. And unfortunately, like I said, these were either sold or given away over the years. I thought I might still have had one or two of them, but I don't. He says he didn't show them; he just showed the comics. Well, next time you're on, you're gonna have to pull out your Power Records so we can talk about them. Now, this that took us through about 83. I'm 11 years old, and about 2 years, I didn't read comics at all. I wasn't really. I guess you could say I felt like I grew out of comics, and I was getting more into books. Now I've been reading books for a few more years. Um, John says we'll do when we get to next time he's able to be a guest host. So we're going to stop from the comics for just a second, and we're going to go to the book side now, because the book side shaped a lot of things for me too. Mm-hmm. One of my first authors was Ray Bradbury. Um, first book I can remember reading from. Now I've read lots of Bradbury, not just these two books, obviously, but these are the two most important works, I think. The Halloween Tree was the first thing I ever read by him. I read it at age 5 in 1977. It was originally published in 72. That was the first thing I ever read by him, and at that time, 77 Halloween. I can remember I was dressed as Chewbacca for Halloween. I don't know why my mother let me be Chewbacca. I was way too short. But I was a little runt. If I was Chewbacca, I was more like what's the name of the Ewoks? I can't remember the name of the Ewok, but I look more like an Ewok than a Chewbacca. But anyway, that was like an actual book that a teacher gave me a copy of. I don't know if it was like I won it as a prize or whatever, but that was the book. It had some beautiful illustrations by Joseph Mergani as well. I don't know if I can share those. I might come back and do a little more on Bradbury at a future time and show that at a different time. I did read Martian Chronicles, but it wouldn't get to it until after the 1980 miniseries. That was something that was kind of like I actually got to watch the movies when they came out. I don't know. It was kind of weird though, because here I am like 8 years old, staying up 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, trying to watch these shows that are a little bit over my head in the way they were performed, but I still enjoyed it. John says, I haven't read The Halloween Tree, but I have seen the animated TV adaptation with Leonard Nimoy as Moundshroud. Great show. Yeah, I think I've seen that. I'm pretty sure I did, but it's been a long time. Anyway, but when the time of that miniseries came out on NBC, I had just finished reading Fahrenheit 451, and that book terrified me. And it terrified me because even though I didn't really understand a lot of the politics and societal structure that was causing this problem, this lack of burn everything as good information or that might make you a free thinker, so to speak. Just the thought of books being burned at all and destroyed was just horrifying for me, because I was a voracious reader. I was constantly reading at that time, and it was like the notion of not having anything left to read because these people are burning these books was just terrible. For an 8-year-old to think about. I was like, what is this? No, don't come to my house and burn my books. Type thing. And that was the actual cover. So I would, kind of have this. I don't know if I think I might even had nightmares about the firemen in this nature, because they were called firemen. For those of you who have not read the book or are unfamiliar with the series, Fahrenheit 451. So that was my introduction, so to speak, to Ray Bradbury, and that he's always been a major influence of mine. Probably why I got into science fiction, short fiction writing, because Ray is such a master of that. John asks, have you saved Francois Truffaut's film version of Fahrenheit 451 with Julie Christie? Yes. I've seen that version. I've seen the recent HBO Max version that had Michael B. Jordan and I can't think of the other actor's name right now. I've seen like 2 or 3 other versions as well. All of them have their own different merits and strengths and weaknesses, but every one of them I think is just very thought-provoking and engaging in different ways. Another author is Alan Dean Foster. The first book was Splinter of the Mind's Eye. Now, Alan had written the adaptation, ghostwritten the adaptation for Star Wars and the early adventures of Skywalker for George Lucas. This was an actual original novel that Alan got credit for. And it was printed originally in 1978, and I got to read a copy of it at age 8 in 1980. I think what had happened was we'd gone up to Michigan to visit my grandparents, and it was at the library, and I got to borrow it as a library copy, if I remember correctly. A lot of technical jargon in it that I can remember that was way over my head for the age I was at the time. But getting the general gist of the story I got the general gist. It was just there was a lot of technical jargon about how to fly the fighters and stuff like that that are, yeah, that was a pretty interesting book, and the cover actually kind of scared me because I was a little bit afraid of Darth Vader. Because when Empire Strikes Back came out, and we were still living in Savannah, Georgia at the time, they had David Prowse in the costume, and they had Jeremy Bosch as Boba Fett doing a store appearance at the Oglethorpe Mall in Savannah, Georgia, promoting the Star Wars film. And I actually had to walk up and be like, right there in front of them. And it's very intimidating when you are, an 8-year-old and you're seeing this, character. It was funny because I probably waited in line, I don't know, probably 4 or 5 hours to meet them. And by the time I got up there, I wanted to go. I didn't want to meet them now. It was kind of interesting because Prowse was not doing the voice the same. He wasn't really talking because obviously James Earl Jones does the voice. But they had some pre-recorded stuff that they were doing with James's voice, and it was very weird. But I did get some autographed photos out of them for it, and that was interesting. But that was kind of like my experience with Vader. I've always been a little bit overwhelmed with that character at times when I was younger. Mm-hmm. So that was my first thing with Alan Dean Foster. My second book was For Love of Mother Not, which is the Flinks series. The cover is what caught my eye. It was 1983 and I was age 11. And this cover, for those of you who might remember my Spellseeker series that hasn't been released fully, but the original co-artist, collaborator, the late Matthew Cameron, drew something akin to this. Instead of the bird, giant bird, ostrich, eaglet thing being ridden, I have it with a kind of a cross between this and the Tauntauns from Empire. But that very much was a direct influence of that design for the Nabru of for the book. I'm going to have to redesign them now that you guys know that. Anyway, the next book was the next following year, 84, Shadowkeep. And this was an actual book that was connected to a video game, computer video game, which is kind of funny because I was asked in questions earlier about video games. I never actually got to see the video game that the book was based on. I just, the cover just caught my eye, very much like For Love of Mother or Not did. And I picked it up. I got it for my birthday in '84, and yeah, I still have my copy of that one. Unfortunately, I don't have my copy of For Love of Mother or Not. I don't know what happened with that one. But he's another one of my key authors. Um, let's see who else. Yes, Rose Estes. Um, she was the creator of the TSR's Endless Quest, also known as Choose Your Own Adventure series. I read the first dozen or so of these, and she wrote like 9 out of the first 12. And this, of course, led me to the official Choose Your Own Adventure comics line, or Choose Your Own Adventure book line, I should say. Then the Wizards and Warriors brand and the Lone Wolf brand as well. And she became a mentor of mine early on in my early teens. We were living in Illinois, and I went up to Kenosha, Wisconsin, where she was at a book signing, and she was the first author I met. And um, she kind of, I don't want to, she was one of those people that didn't shoot other people down. I guess you could say she was one of these people that was very enthusiastic and very um, forth giving to others, and wanting them to um, achieve their dreams as much as she did. I guess be the best way to put it. And so she was very helpful in terms of figuring out um, what I want to do as a storyteller early on. When I was writing stuff, she would give me, she'd write letters back to me back and forth once in a while. And I guess that kind of helped me build some of the characters and stuff that I would later use in comics. I'm trying to get my other one here. Madeline L'Engle's Time Quintet. Um, really, it's the first 3 books: Wrinkle in Time, Wind in the Door, and A Swiftly Tilting Planet. Those I read around 79 or 80, around age 7 or 8. I didn't even really know that the next 2 books, Many Waters and Acceptable Time, were even out until I was in college, in adulthood, and didn't really hold the same power for me. Probably because I was older, and it had been a long time since I read her work. Um, but I remember a lot of the first 3 were pretty impactful. Um, the sad part of that is, as much as I loved those books when I was a kid, when Disney did the new movies, did the Wrinkle in Time movie, couldn't get through the first 25 to 30 minutes of it before I turned it off. I don't know what happened. um, you'd think I would have been interested, but I just, nothing. I don't know why. Very sad about that. Um, it did make me go back and reread the books, though. So I did enjoy rereading them. Mm-hmm. Yep. And of course, we can't go on without talking about Tolkien and Lord of the Rings. I'm not exactly sure when I first read them. I believe that I borrowed hardcovers from the library around age 6 or 7 for The Hobbit. and the Fellowship of the Ring. Um, I think that was something my father, um, and I, he would read it to me, and I would read with him. Um, when I was younger, that's one of the books I think that he did that. Um, but the set that I just showed on the image was 81 or 82 when this particular editions were put out, and this is the first full set that I can remember owning. Was this set of paperbacks from Ballantine? There have been so many editions of this series that you can, but and of course Tolkien tied into D&D with Rose Estes and stuff like that, and that's kind of what drove me into that whole thing. And while we will talk about gaming, we're not going to talk about the role-playing games tonight. We're going to talk about that in a future edition of the show. Mostly because I just didn't have time to do everything for gaming as well tonight. Let's go ahead and get back to the comics, though. This is around 85 now. And I've said this several times. I met a kid on the bus by the name of Brian Roseboom. Coming home from school, he was describing and acting out scenes from the X-Men comics at the time. And I had heard of X-Men. I remember seeing X-Men on Spider-Man as Amazing Friends, but I'd never actually read X-Men comics at that point. And his enthusiasm and his behavior just enticed me enough to get off the bus at his bus stop and go to his house. And as fate would have it, his first mail order subscription issue came in, which was 196. And that is the cover you see in the far left, top left. And that was either out in August or October of 85. I can't remember which. Very good story. Xavier, Charles Xavier, the founder of the X-Men, has been mugged in an earlier episode of the series, issue of the series. And his psychic abilities aren't fully returned yet because he had trauma from being beaten up, mugged. And he's in a lecture for one of his university classes, and he catches a glimpse of psychic that someone wants to kill somebody. And so we got to stop this. So he gets the X-Men, and they have to do this kind of like hunt, find the evidence, find out who's trying to kill who before they can do it. And interestingly enough, none of the characters are in costume throughout the whole storyline. They're all in street clothes, except for Rogue, she's wearing her costume, but it's kind of her punk fashion attire anyway. And as it turns out, Xavier is the victim, of course, and they do figure out who's doing what and everything, but the character that you see in black and Wolverine with the claws up and close is Rachel Summers in her Hound costume. And she's trying to save Kitty Pryde because Kitty's going to be killed if she doesn't. There was an awesome scene in that comic as well with Kitty and Wolverine where Wolverine's smoking a cigar sitting on school steps, and Kitty's telling him, well, we've gone through so much of this stuff and we've eliminated these people as prospects. Give me that cigar. And he's like, yeah, that was a good job, kid. How can you stand that? Well, I got a constitution and a healing factor. Can't recommend it for you, kiddo. Love that because both my parents smoke and I hated that. And I wanted them to quit smoking. That was like the perfect thing for me for my first comic to come back to. Um, I remember getting that issue right away after reading Brian's copy and showing that scene to my parents. And they got a kick out of it. So, yeah. But my mother was pretty smart. By Christmas of that year, everything else you see on this page, I got for Christmas. God Loves Man Kills and the Dark Phoenix Saga and Days of Future Past, which are arguably the three top X-Men storylines of all time. She got me Mighty Marvel Team Up Thrillers, which had a bunch of different stories in there. But the one that I liked the most was Spider-Man and Mary Jane as Red Sonja. Again, Claremont, Byrne, and Austin. This is in conjunction with getting X-Men by Claremont and Byrne and Austin. So I was like, yeah, that's what I like. Marvel Greatest Superhero Battles. Pretty decent stuff. And of course, The Power of Iron Man, which is also known as the Demon in the Bottle storyline, which is the alcoholism storyline. All of this I got for Christmas in '85, a few short months after meeting Brian. And that was really what set everything off. By the time I was doing that, I was just there, you know. I read X-Men and Conan, the Barbarian, mostly at that time. And this is the issue, 95. That was when he had it. It was the only Conan he had at the time. But it was a really cool cover, and I liked it. I found the next issue, 105. First issue I found in a discount bin and got it for $0.25. My first subscription issue was 175 in October of '85. And my first magazine size comic was Savage Sword of Conan, which was 126 in July of '86. This again tied into my Dungeons and Dragons role-playing stuff going on at the time. And I didn't just play D&D. Because of X-Men and the Marvel stuff, I also got into Marvel role-playing games as well. But again, we'll talk about that another time when we get into that side of my interest and career. Now, those are the books that hooked me. But what happened when I got hooked on comics? Well, I went crazy and raided the dime, quarter, and 50-cent boxes, of course. And here's what I first uncovered. Wallywood and Gentleman Gene Colan at a dime per issue. Now, these books were not in mint condition. They were falling apart with covers that were barely attached. But come on now. This is the early Marvel. Prices at cheaper than cover price. These were 12-cent books. I'm getting them for a dime. It's a steal, really, to my 13-year-old mind, and really to my 48-year-old mind now, for that matter, to actually get these stories. It's like issue 10, 22, 23, 25, 26, 33 from Daredevil, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, and 41, I believe is what I got of Daredevil. Really enjoyed those. Also got Gene Colan, Iron Man, and Jack Kirby, Captain America reprints from Tales of Suspense for a dime each. Those were fun. That was my first introduction to Kirby, where I really knew what Kirby. I mean, I did see Kirby in those collections, Greatest Superhero Battles and Mighty Marvel Team Up Thrillers, but this was more just seeing him as him at that time. And I got Thor, and this is the Kirby Thor. So I love this stuff. 136 is amazing, where Jane Foster is brought to Asgard, and Thor wants to marry her, and Odin's like, okay, you want to marry her? I'm going to make her immortal, and she has to pass a certain test, or else you can't marry her. And of course, she can't pass the test. She's too afraid of whatever it is, and so she demands Odin send her back to Earth and be so she can remain human, and that's what happens. And um, then Thor's reintroduced to Sif, which is kind of his love in a way too. So, um, actually, not in a way, he is. She is rather. So that was kind of a fun storyline for that. And a lot of these books were inked by Vince Colletta, and Vince Colletta always gets all this hate from people. Oh, he ruined Jack Kirby, and I say, screw you. These comics rocked. I love this stuff, and I think Colletta did just a fine job inking him. I really do. I really think Colletta did some bang up work on that stuff. I got a lot of other 50-cent books as well. I still have the 3 X-Men in the bottom right corner in my collection. Don't think I have any of the others, unfortunately. I love the Spider-Man with the Spider-Mobile because people might not remember back in the 70s, they used to have the Mego action figures for Spider-Man, and there was a Spider-Mobile, a Spider Buggy toy that I had with Spider-Man. So to me, it was like, well, it's not quite right. It's not the right design. It should be like the toy, but I just thought it was kind of cool that they had that in there. So at the time, I was reading just X-Men and Conan. And but about a year, maybe 15 issues, I got tired of Conan. So I changed off to DP7. And I also started reading the Defenders. Now, Defenders I got because I was in Michigan and I went to a little convenience type store that was on the lake where we lived, and they just happened to have 147, which is the one with the American flag cover, and it had the X-Men in it. It had Beast, Iceman, and Angel in it, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. I'll check this out. I didn't know they were going to cancel it 4 or 5 months later, but it led me to buying a bunch of back issues for the Defenders. And at one time, I did have a complete run from 1 to 152, but unfortunately, I had to sell it. And then, of course, again, DP7. This was the only New Universe title I ever bought, and I got it via mail order subscription for the first 13 issues. My subscription started with number 2. I got number 1 off the newsstand. I lost interest in it after a year, maybe. But in retrospect, I think Mark Gruenwald was really doing Doom Patrol meets Stephen King, especially Antibody, the dark ghost figure on the cover, who is clearly a Negative Man knockoff. But there's other characters in here that just remind me of the Doom Patrol characters. It's a very well-written series. I'm not exactly sure why I'd lost interest, but I did. I think what happened was Marvel had just launched the new Wolverine and Excalibur ongoing series books, and I had to give up that title in order to get those. But, that is what it is at that time. But before you think I was just a Marvel zombie when I started collecting comics regularly, I was dabbling in the indie scene as well. Eastman and Laird's Fugitoid and Burns' Raj 2000 were early influences on my own comics, particularly my comedy series Bionic Boy, Larry Livewire, and Spacey the Alien, which I mentioned was probably my most successful piece. I'll go ahead and pull out a recent drawing of Spacey to remind you guys what he looks like. You can see that version of Spacey and compare it to the Fugitoid and Raj 2000 and see how similar they are in designs and how those characters influence mine. I also I'd seen Gizmo, and I hadn't actually got a chance to read it until I was much later. But I did I did dig it when I saw it, and I reviewed Gizmo recently, in the last week or two. So you might want to check a back episode for the Gizmo review. I'm not going to review it again. And then there was this is pretty much all I got from Mirage Studios was Volume One of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles number 29 through 36, and a one shot called Grunts. And why that is, I'm not really sure. I remember my friends in the 80s having those early Ninja Turtle books in black and white. For whatever reason, their art never really appealed to me. And I just, I mean, I can remember they used to bring them to school in junior high and, you know, brag about how these books are going to go up in value and all that stuff that was going on. It was true. And they're like, we got one. And I'm like, I don't care. I don't like the art. But for whatever reason, not really sure why, um, the AC Farley issue for number 29, um, Men of Shadow, is the name of that particular issue. The turtles are fighting against vampires and stuff like that. And that, for some reason, that particular cover and the art style caught my and kept my attention. So went ahead and got that. And then, seeing the cover from Rick Veitch for 31, or for pardon me, for 30, where they're doing kind of like a Mad Max thing with Casey Jones and Raph trying to drive this car. I was like, oh, okay, I'll try that. The Michael Zulli stuff, I was pretty interested in. Was very disappointed that Zulli didn't do 32 and 33, and that um, I didn't even buy 32 or 33 because to me it wasn't Zulli, it wasn't what I wanted. I wanted the rest of that story. For whatever reason, though, McWeeney's cover caught my eye at issue 34, but I was getting a little bit ticked off because where's the Michael Zulli, and luckily they did come back with 35 and 36 to get the rest of that story. But because it took so long, 3 or 4 months after the first issue ran, before I got the rest of the Turtle story, that's pretty much why I kind of quit reading Turtles as well. Because it's like, I don't want to wait. And here's some other stories in between. No, I want the story I was reading. So that's kind of why I lost interest in Turtles in that respect. But I did, as a result, I did discover Rick Veitch and Michael Zulli, and like I said, I did like AC Farley, but unfortunately, it seemed like he disappeared from the comics market post his work on Turtles. Now, these comics and some do-it-yourself homemade comics, I guess you could say, made by my friends in junior high, are what really kept me and pushed me into comics professionally. I had two friends in junior high, Tim Jones III and Paul Mazurik. Tim did a book called Saint Justice, which was about his uncle, who was a recovering alcoholic, and he turned his uncle into a superhero priest who has to overcome his alcoholism so that he can help humanity get through the rapture. And this kid's in 7th grade when he's writing it and drawing it. So it's pretty heavy stuff for a kid his age, figuring this out and writing it. And I was his editor for 3 issues on that. I issued, that was my first professional work in comics. Um, I basically proofread it, edited, and ghost wrote some of the stuff for Tim's book from issues 3 through 5. And unfortunately, Tim and I ended up going to different high schools after junior high, and his grades slipped to a point where his father got mad and put his foot down and said, "You can't do the book anymore. I'm not going to print the book for you until you get your grades back up." Um, which he did, but it wasn't until much later. And by the time he did, well, he wasn't that interested in comics anymore. He did finish the story arc. It was an 8-issue series. But he went on to become an auto CAD designer for Toyota, who designs cars. Now, Paul Mazurek, we did attend the same high school my freshman year in '86 and '87. Unfortunately, we didn't see much of each other because I was taking the college preparatory program and he was taking a different educational track. So the only other time we saw each other was in a mechanical drawing class. And so I didn't really, his work influenced me, but it wasn't the same as when I was working with Tim. Now, in high school, as fate would have it, I was taking journalism class in my freshman year. And this sophomore student and myself were assigned to learn what the school's mascot's name was and what the history of the character was, because nobody in the school seemed to know. Well, we probably spent 2 weeks looking for the answers, and I just decided for myself that it would be cooler just to have a contest to rename the mascot. And so I did a comic strip called The Ram, trying out for the football team, but he can't join the team until he's a registered student. You can't do that without an identity. Now, the other student continued the research, and he found out that the Ram's name was Willie. And so the teacher ran his comic strip instead, which is logical. I'm not complaining about the teacher doing what he did. But everybody hated both the mascot's name and the strip that the other student drew. I mean, really, the Ram? Come on. But as you know, it was a big fight in the school. They wanted to have the vote and rename, but the board wouldn't let them do it, so we were stuck with Willie the Ram. But that's what really bit me for drawing comics was that experience. I would start doing little newspaper cartoons, the one panel strips and stuff like that for the Rampage, which was the name of the school newspaper. Then I also would meet Kevin Lomas at my first high school, Grayslake High School in Illinois in '87, who would later go on to do a comic book called Mofado 160, which was a silent comic about an alien who crash lands on Earth during the Triassic period while Pangea existed, and the alien has to survive against dinosaurs and other threats until help comes. And unfortunately, all that stuff that I had, and I used to have all this stuff, I wanted to share it with you on the show. Unfortunately, when I graduated from college, my parents sold their house in Michigan and were moving out west, and I went with them. And the truck broke down, and somewhere either the stuff got left behind or the people who were switching it over from one truck to the other stole some of my comics. And then that stuff was included with what was lost. So a lot of that stuff I can't ever get back, unfortunately. At the end of my freshman year, my family relocated, freshman year in high school, that is. My family relocated from Illinois to Michigan. and my access to comics is pretty much restricted to mail order subscription or newsstand for about 2 years. Um, During that time, a student by the name of Louis Mercado opened a sort of comic shop. It was, I don't know what you want to call it. He had a little corner inside of the store. Uh, Yours truly of Oscoda, Michigan, which is still there to this very day. Uh, I think it's still an ice cream parlor and custom T-shirt shop. Um, it was back then. I think it still is now. But he had a spinner rack, a poster rack, and a bookshelf of space in the store for about maybe 4 months before he went under. And I remember buying Batman: The Killing Joke, the X-Men poster by Arthur Adams and Linda Medley, the first Excalibur graphic novel before they did launching the original ongoing series, and a solo X-Mutants one-shot drawn by Ron Lim for my 16th birthday in 1988. And I think he was open maybe 4 days at that point. So it's like the first week he was open, that's when I went in and got that stuff. Unfortunately, my parents were very strict at that time, and it was just too far for me to ride a bike or walk to the store. I think it was something like 14 miles to the store or something. It was a while, pretty far thing to go. So I never got to go back to buy anything from them because they would never stop to let me go look. It was like, and they weren't going to let me take the car just to go drive over there to buy comics. I had to have other reasons to go. Just it never worked. That kind of killed our friendship in school as a result because he was like, well, I thought you liked comics. You don't support my store. What's going on? Type thing. And I understand it's frustrating because, you want to make a living at this stuff, and it's not always easy. So, on top of it, high school there sucked. And I mean sucked. Because I didn't take art class at my first high school because I was taking college preparatory, and they didn't want me to take art my freshman year. You take art your sophomore year in college prep, but not your freshman. Don't ask me why. But anyway, since I didn't take art class at my first high school, I was blocked at Oscoda from taking art classes, period, as per their school policy, which was completely idiotic because 54% of the students were from the military base right by at the time who were coming and going and could have had any reasons not to be taking those classes. So they come in after their freshman year and didn't get to take art class. They can't take it. That's discrimination. Why would you restrict anyone from taking a class they want to take anyway? That's stupid. So I kind of lost interest in comics creating until I got back into college in 1989. And these are the things I got for my birthday that year. And it says next to college years. We're going to talk about that next week. I hope that's kind of given a little bit of a taste of what got me started into this crazy scene. Next week, we'll talk about my college years. We'll talk about me joining Amateur Press Alliances, Super Team Amateur Press Alliance, and co-founding the Comic Artist Press Alliance at Central Michigan University. We'll show you some of my earliest pro-published work in comics. And we'll talk about the gaming side a little bit too and how that developed. Okay? So, with that being said, if you want to reach me on Facebook, you can reach me at lewis.brightraven, deviantart.com/brightraven, YouTube, Quoth Raven, Lewis Brightraven. You can email me at quotheravenlbr72@gmail.com and at Yahoo at lewisbrightraven@yahoo.com. The podcast usually airs on Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. However, because of Booktober, I've been doing comic book reviews daily this month. Tomorrow's show for Booktober will not be running until late in the evening. I have some errands to run throughout the day, and I just won't have time to do it all and be here to do that. So I'll do it tomorrow night. And on Saturday, we will have two shows. We will have the Booktober event, and then we'll have a live draw event, in which case I will be drawing a gag comic sketch cover on Morbius the Vampire. For those of you, you should go back and watch my Booktober events if you haven't already. I reviewed this book and I tell you how much of a joke it was. I'm going to make a joke on the cover of it, basically. I'm going to do that on Saturday. I don't know exactly the times on Saturday yet. And I'm going to do the same thing on Sunday with the Hawkeye cover that I mentioned. I reviewed Hawkeye, all new Hawkeye on the Booktober earlier this week as well. So that is our plan for this weekend. I want to thank you for watching, as always. But before we go, many of you missed the beginning of the show. So I'm going to go back. There's a contest. First person who emails me at my address, LewisBrightRaven, Quoth the Raven, and lbr72@gmail.com. This line, back through the years I go wandering once again, back to the seasons of my youth, is a parody line from an actual song that exists. The first person who emails me, the artist in the song that I'm parodying from will receive a prize. I have not checked my Gmail for that. I will check my Gmail to see if anyone's actually done that. I don't think so. We'll check it. Nope, nobody has. No one's done it. So there you go, folks. Be the first person to answer that question correctly, and you will win a prize. And I'll announce the winner when you. I'll announce the winner next week, probably. Okay. So until then, see you next week. Have a safe weekend. See you tomorrow, actually, probably in the evening sometime.